Good morning, brethren, and welcome to our live program entitled A Glance at the Word, which is broadcast every Monday and every Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. West Africa time, which is GMT +1. Today is Monday, the 2nd of November 2020, and as we promised, we are continuing with the topic that we started last week, and which is entitled David, a man after God's heart. So far, we have been talking of the positive characteristics of the life of David. We said, among other things, that David was handsome, David was highly talented as a harp player. David was brave and courageous. David was wise in speech, or prudent in speech, so he was a wise speaker. David was spirit-filled, and David was a man of great faith. Today, we will continue to talk of the positive side of David's life. Let's read 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 45 to 47. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 45 to 47. Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." You see, we said that David was courageous, David was brave, and David was full of faith. And he actually was a man of great faith. But David was also bold. It required much boldness to talk to Goliath with the words that David used. It's true that David had killed the lion and the bear. Yet the lion and the bear didn't have any spear. The lion and the bear didn't have any javelin. And the lion and the bear didn't have any sword. Moreover, the lion and the bear were not protected by any armor. The lion and the bear were not protected by any shield. And the lion and the bear were not protected by any helmet on their heads. Goliath was much more difficult to kill. Goliath was much more than 2.5 meters tall. He was armored with a bronze coat of mail weighing about 56 kilograms. He had bronze armor on his legs. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was hiding most of his body behind a big shield. So humanly and logically speaking, it was impossible for David to kill Goliath. Even though he could have a sword and a spear, which he didn't have at all. Goliath was physically very well protected. Moreover, Goliath was a man of war since his youth. And that's not all. Goliath also had terribly effective weapons. He had a dreadful spear. He had a bronze javelin. And he had a sword. David only had a sling, 5 smooth stones that he picked from the brook, and his shepherd's staff. Nothing that could kill Goliath. Nothing that could kill even a dog. So how could he stand against Goliath? And mainly, how could he be able to kill Goliath? Yet, this apparent inferiority didn't frighten David. This apparent inferiority didn't stop David from speaking boldly to Goliath. And these words of David make us understand the way that David was viewing God. David had a very good knowledge of God. David knew that God loved Israel and would always protect Israel against all the other nations. David knew that God was the God of Israel. David knew that God was also the commander-in-chief of the armies of Israel. David knew that whoever defied the armies of Israel was in fact defying the armies of God. And David clearly called God the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel. Thus, as David himself said it, the battle against Goliath wouldn't be David's battle, it would be God's battle. Because whoever attacked anybody in Israel was attacking God himself, since God was the God of Israel and the God of the armies of Israel. And David clearly knew that no one can ever defeat God. That David clearly knew it. So this battle, being God's battle, David was fully convinced that he only was God's messenger that he only was a tool in God's hands to deliver Israel from the harassment of the Philistines. This is why David said that he had come to Goliath in the name of the God of the armies of Israel. And this also is why David was fully convinced that he would kill Goliath. He undoubtedly knew these words that God had said to Joshua, and he certainly made these words his own. Because God told Joshua, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage. So David knew these words very well, and he put himself at the place of Joshua, and he made these words be his own words, be words that God was addressing him, David. So David was convinced that no matter what, he would kill Goliath. And this actually is what he did. This actually is what happened. David killed Goliath. And David used Goliath's own sword to kill him. Remember, when he threw the stone hit the forehead of Goliath. It entered the head of Goliath, and Goliath fell on the ground. And David ran, took Goliath's own sword, and cut off his head. He took Goliath's own sword to kill him, to finish the work that the little stone had started. This we read in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 51. David did what no one else in Israel did. David dared when no one else in Israel dared. Where everybody else was seeing a dreadful, frightening giant, David saw a miserable, uncircumcised wretch. Where everyone else was seeing an insurmountable challenge, David was seeing something else. Where everyone else in Israel was seeing an impossible challenge, David saw an opportunity to deliver Israel from the threat of the Philistines. So David dared, and he succeeded where no man of war in Israel ever succeeded. David succeeded where no man of war in Israel even ever dared. You know, the simplest way never to succeed in any given situation is not to dare at all. If you don't dare, be certain that you will never succeed. If you don't dare to stand against a given situation, you will never defeat that situation. You will never overcome that situation. David was a daring person. David was also a man who wasn't afraid to take initiatives. The distance between Bethlehem, where he lives with his family, and the valley of Elah, where the armies of Israel were supposed to be fighting against the Philistines, was about 35 kilometers, when we calculate according to the measurements that are given in the Bible. 35 kilometers. On that special morning, David walked, or maybe ran, the 35 kilometers from Bethlehem to the valley of Elah, and he witnessed Goliath defying the armies of Israel. He witnessed Goliath defying the armies of the living God. David didn't consider that he was tired. Remember, he has walked, or he has run 35 kilometers in a row. But he didn't consider that he was tired. He decided to take action. He took the initiative to fight Goliath, he who was tired. Goliath told Israel to choose a man who could fight against him. For 40 days, for 40 full days, Israel wasn't capable of making that choice. But David didn't care. David didn't say, okay, let's agree on one person, or let's choose one person, or even, please choose me. No, David didn't say that. David instead volunteered on his own to go and fight Goliath. David took the initiative to fight Goliath on his own. David was a man of action. David was also determinate. Remember, Eliab, his eldest brother, tried to discourage him, but he didn't give up. Saul, the king of Israel, clearly discouraged him, asking him not to fight Goliath. But he didn't give up either. He was boldly determined to fight Goliath. He was determined to fight for the interests of God. Without any determination, you cannot go far. Without any determination, you cannot overcome difficult situation. Without any determination, you are likely to give up every time that a hindrance shows up before you. You will likely be inclined to give up, to abandon. So you need to be determinate, as David was. You need determination to always be at God's side. You need determination to succeed in life. We are going to stop here for today. We will continue with this same topic on this coming Wednesday. Now, let me just remind you that this program, A Glance at the Word, is broadcast live every Monday and every Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. West Africa time, which is GMT +1. We also have live broadcast in French entitled École de Betzalel with Bishop Floribert Mawit every Monday at 5:30 p.m. West Africa time, which is GMT +1, and every Tuesday every Thursday and every Saturday at 9 a.m. West Africa time, which is GMT plus 1. We have one other live broadcast program in French every Sunday at 8 a.m. West Africa time. It is called Le Pain de Champion with Bishop Floribert Mawit. We have two bilingual broadcasts. We have two bilingual programs, which are our Sunday services. They are broadcast live respectively at 10 a.m. and at 12 p.m. West Africa time, which is GMT plus 1. God bless you abundantly beyond all your expectations. Have a blessed week.